So, um, imagine you sign a contract with a known scammer,
Right.
which, I mean, you don't know it at the time,
Yeah,
obviously.
of course not.
But then, like a few days later, you realize you've been entirely conned. So naturally, you break the deal, you cancel the transfer, and just walk away.
As anyone would.
Exactly. In our modern legal system, you were completely justified. The contract was signed under false pretenses, so it's, null and void.
Totally.
But according to the deeply fascinating and honestly highly uncompromising essay we're diving into today, that single broken promise, even to a malicious scammer,
Mm.
just permanently scarred your spiritual structure,
Yeah, and not just that, it basically bars you from paradise and actively contributes to global warming.
which is just wild. Welcome to the Deep Dives, everyone.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to unpack this highly specific, almost mystical worldview.
It's quite the journey.
It really is. We're looking at sources centered around an essay by an author named Su Feng. It's titled Beware of Leaving Scars on the Structure of Life, and it's from December of 2025. And our goal here is to explore how this essay connects the simple concept of keeping your word to literal climate change, these invisible things called antimatter structures, and humanity's next evolutionary leap.
It's a staggering escalation of stakes, honestly. It takes the most mundane human interaction imaginable, just, giving someone your word, and elevates it to a matter of brutal, unforgiving cosmic physics.
Totally. So whether you're a deeply spiritual person or just someone who's fascinated by really rigid ethical frameworks, today's text offers a super thought-provoking perspective on what it actually means to be truly trustworthy.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's just jump right in. The essay opens with this really striking premise. The quote is, "Perfectly beautiful things are only for perfectly beautiful lives."
Which sounds super poetic on the surface, right?
Yeah, but then it immediately pivots into this vocabulary that sounds way more like quantum mechanics.
Exactly. So the author defines a perfectly beautiful life in a surprisingly technical way.
Okay, lay it on us.
According to the text, it's a life that has absolutely no scars on its, quote, antimatter structure.
Right, the antimatter structure.
Yeah. And notice how Schwiving is totally bypassing traditional religious terminology here.
Oh, yeah. You don't see the word soul or karma used in this immediate context at all.
Right. By choosing a phrase like antimatter structure, the author is suggesting that our moral ledger is fundamentally woven into the hard physics of the universe.
Like it's an actual thing.
Exactly. It's a tangible structural blueprint. We just can't see it with our current level of perception. And that structure, it must remain entirely pristine to reach the ultimate destination.
Okay, let's unpack this antimatter structure idea a bit more for everyone listening. Because, antimatter is a literal particle physics term.
Yes, it is.
It really makes you wonder if the author is implying our spiritual ledger is literally made of physical subatomic particles,
Hmm.
or if this is just an elaborate metaphor for something we, just don't have the science to measure yet.
It's fascinating because the text blurs the line between physics and spirituality so intensely.
It really does. But either way, it functions almost like a cosmic credit score attached to your soul.
Hmm.
And a scar is like a massive ding on that score that you can't just wipe clean.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
And keeping that antimatter structure unscarred is the only way to gain access to the ultimate living spaces described in the text.
Right. The essay calls them the Elysium, and it's Fairyland Archipelago.
Yes. Those locations are presented as the absolute pinnacle of existence. They are the perfectly beautiful living spaces reserved exclusively for those perfectly beautiful lives.
And the rule for getting in is strict, right?
Oh, it is absolute, binary, and totally unyielding. You can only experience that level of reality if your antimatter structure is unscarred. A single blemish completely disqualifies you.
Wow.
Yeah, there's no appeals process, no purgatory where you can work it off, and definitely no customer service desk where you can, explain your unique situation.
Yeah. So it's like, imagine a promise is a line of code you're actively programming into reality.
Right.
When you break that promise, you don't just delete the code. You create a fatal logic error, like a bug in your own source code.
Exactly, and that bug is the scar.
And it's fundamentally recorded in the fabric of who you are, which really begs the question, what exactly causes these permanent scars? In a world full of so much violence and theft, what is the ultimate transgression in this framework?
Breaking your word.
Just breaking your word.
Just that. Failing to keep a promise. The text is incredibly explicit about this. Out of all the behaviors that can damage a human life, Losing your credibility is cited as the single most harmful thing you can do to your life structure.
More than anything else.
Yeah, because when you make a promise, you're essentially creating a localized law within the universe. You are declaring that a specific event will happen.
So by breaking it.
By breaking it, you fracture reality. You inject chaos and untruth into the fundamental structure of life itself.
Man. And the way the text scales the consequences of that chaos is genuinely shocking.
It really escalates quickly.
Yeah. It starts at the micro level, looking at the individual. Shufeng writes that a trustworthy person will have their, quote, lucky star shining high and will move forward steadily through life.
Right, they find success.
But meanwhile, an untrustworthy person is basically doomed to end up lonely, isolated, and destitute.
And the author really emphasizes that long-term perspective because, a liar or a con artist might appear wealthy or successful today.
Sure, we see that all the time.
But the universal ledger, that antimatter structure, cannot be cheated. The structural damage will eventually force a rebalancing, which leads that person to ruin. The physics of their own deceit basically collapses their reality.
Okay, but the author doesn't stop with individual ruin.
No, not at all.
The lens pans way out to the national level, claiming that a trustworthy nation becomes civilized and developed, while a nation that breaks its promises falls into poverty and disorder.
Which is a bold claim on its own.
Totally. But then we reach the global level, and this is where the claims become, frankly, incredibly provocative. The text literally links contemporary broken promises to massive natural disasters and rising global temperatures.
Yeah, this is a crucial leap in the philosophy. The text states that the broken promises of people today have led directly to continuous social conflict and, remarkably, natural climate change.
Here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit controversial.
Yeah.
I really want us to dissect this connection because it's a massive leap to link a human moral failing to physical climate change.
It definitely forces you to stop and think.
It forces us to ask how this mechanism is supposed to work. Like, is the author speaking metaphorically here, suggesting that our moral decay causes us to just, become greedy and neglect the planet?
Right, the sociological angle.
Yeah. Or are they literally suggesting that the spiritual friction of our broken words physically heats up the globe?
Well, according to the text, it reads as a literal cause and effect relationship.
Wait, really? Literal heat?
Yes. In this worldview, the physical world of matter and the spiritual world of antimatter aren't separate domains. They overlap and influence each other constantly. So if every broken promise injects chaos into the antimatter structure, and that structure underpins physical reality...
Then billions of broken promises.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Billions of broken promises create an immense amount of metaphysical friction. And the text suggests that friction generates literal heat and disorder, which bleeds over into our atmosphere as extreme weather and rising temperatures.
Oh.
Yeah, so global warming in this framework isn't just about carbon emissions. It's a spiritual footprint issue. The collective scars on humanity's antimatter structure are literally manifesting as environmental collapse.
That is just an overwhelming amount of responsibility to place on the integrity of our everyday conversations.
It really is.
It totally removes the blame from, faceless corporations and places it squarely on whether or not you kept that lunch date you promised your friend.
And the author actually points to historical precedent to support this idea of macro-level consequences.
Oh, right, the historical evidence.
Yeah, they draw specifically on biblical texts, referencing both the Old and New Testaments. The essay claims that the Israelites breaking their covenant led directly to thousands of years of displacement and wandering.
And Xuefeng uses this not as a religious allegory. Right?
No, he uses it as historical data. The argument here is that when a massive covenant is broken, a massive, real-world, geographical consequence must logically follow. The universe simply does not tolerate a breach of contract.
Okay, so if the universe is completely unforgiving of broken promises, that immediately puts us in a terrifying position when we deal with bad actors in the real world.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's easy enough to keep a promise to your family or a trusted colleague, but we live in a world filled with deceit, manipulation, and people who are actively trying to exploit us.
True.
So what happens when you make a promise to someone who turns out to be a terrible person? Like my example in the intro with the scammer.
The author actually anticipates that exact dilemma, and it marks the point where the text shifts from a challenging moral guideline into a radically extreme, uncompromising doctrine.
Bless yourselves.
Yeah. The essay poses a hypothetical scenario. It asks, quote, "What if I am facing a bad person, a demon, a monster, or a huge scammer? Do I still have to keep my word?" And the answer?
The author's answer is an absolute, unconditional yes.
See, that is where modern legal and moral sensibilities just hit a brick wall.
Completely.
The text explicitly says whether the other party keeps their word is their business, not ours. It demands that you must prefer to suffer economic loss, the total destruction of your reputation, or even physical death, rather than break a promise and leave a scar on your life structure.
It requires a total reorientation of what you consider valuable. In this framework, your physical body, your bank account, your social standing, they're entirely temporary.
Because they belong to the material world.
Yeah.
Right, which is finite. Your antimatter structure, however, is eternal. Therefore, sacrificing your eternal architecture to save your temporary physical wealth is basically mathematically the wrong choice. The internal must be prioritized over the external, regardless of the immediate pain.
And to drive this point home, the author uses this incredibly visceral analogy about vomiting, which is meant to just strip away all context from our actions.
Yeah, the vomiting analogy. So the text asks, if you realize you've been scammed and keeping the promise will cause you massive financial ruin, can you break it?
And Xue Feng vehemently says no.
Right. He insists that keeping a promise and being scammed are two entirely different, unrelated facts.
Okay.
Then comes the analogy. Vomiting is simply the factual act of expelling matter from your stomach. Whatever caused it, whether it was bad food, an illness, or intentional poisoning, is totally irrelevant to the act itself.
The vomiting is just a fact.
Exactly. And a broken promise is a broken promise. The context of why you broke it doesn't change its factual existence in the universe. The scar forms regardless of your justification.
Okay, so what does this all mean for us in the real world? Because I have to push back hard on this vomiting analogy.
Go for it.
It is incredibly rigid. I mean, to the point of its absurdity, the author is saying the act itself taints you, completely ignoring intent or self-defense.
Yeah, context doesn't matter.
It's like saying if someone violently shoves you into a mud puddle, you still chose to get your shoes dirty, and you are entirely to blame for the mud on your clothes.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. It demands a level of ethical martyrdom that is almost impossible for any human being to practice. You're asking people to willingly walk into financial ruin or physical harm just to maintain this invisible ledger.
Well, it is the ultimate demand for ethical martyrdom, like you said. It entirely rejects human law in favor of cosmic law.
Because human courts care about fraud and duress.
Exactly. The universe, according to Xue Feng, only registers the binary physics of the word given versus the word kept. The antimatter structure doesn't have a section for footnotes or explanations.
No appeals process.
None. If you give your word and don't keep it, the structure scars. It's brutal, but, it's entirely logically consistent within its own extreme parameters.
Terrifyingly consistent. And this strictness isn't just a punitive measure, right?
Yeah.
It's deeply tied to a very specific futuristic goal that the author outlines toward the end of the essay.
Right, it's not just about punishment.
We aren't just trying to earn a ticket to Elysium here. The text speaks about a collective evolutionary step called humanity's 3.0 civilization era.
Yes. So the author acknowledges that the current world, the one we navigate every day, is deeply flawed.
Understatement of the year.
Seriously, the essay explicitly describes the human world as being filled with craftiness, calculation, and innumerable breaches of trust.
It's a broken system.
Exactly, a broken, polluted system. And that is precisely why the rule about keeping promises is so draconian. If you want to graduate from this broken system and upgrade to Humanity 3.0, you simply cannot bring the behaviors of the old system with you.
I love that framing. It's
Yeah.
like you cannot bring the bugs into the new software update.
That's exactly it.
If you operate with deceit, even justified deceit used in self-defense against a scammer, your code is still contaminated. Only radical, unconditional integrity qualifies you for the 3.0 era.
And the author directs a very specific warning about this to a group called the Chanyuan Grass.
Oh, right. We should probably define those terms to understand the full weight of the warning.
Definitely. So Chanyuan Grass is the specific term used for members or followers of this philosophy.
Got it.
And the text mentions them living in the second home, which refers to their intentional living communities, or basically their elevated spiritual state. So the author is addressing the inner circle here.
The insiders.
Right. Xue Feng tells the Chanyuan Grass, if you fail to keep your promises and suffering suddenly falls upon you, do not look outward for someone to blame.
Yeah, the essay warns them not to blame their guides, the gods, the Buddhas, or the creator. It strips away any notion of, like, an angry deity throwing lightning bolts from the sky because you told a lie.
Exactly. The punishment is entirely self-earned. Your own compromised antimatter structure is simply collapsing under the weight of its own internal flaws.
It's a purely mechanical reaction.
Yes. And this concept culminates in a really profound metaphor about the spiritual garden. The author warns that weeds and poisonous grass, which represent these broken promises and calculations, will overtake the garden and cause these permanent scars.
Which leads to that one really arresting line about contamination.
Right. The quote is, pollution is an instant thing, but clearing it takes a long time.
Pollution is an instant thing, but clearing it takes a long time. That phrase, it just really resonates, regardless of whether you buy into the literal physics of antimatter structures.
Oh, absolutely.
It perfectly encapsulates the fragile nature of credibility. It takes a lifetime of consistent action to build genuine trust, and literally a fraction of a second to completely destroy it.
It's so true.
Think of a single drop of dark ink hitting a glass of crystal clear water. The contamination is immediate. Filtering that ink back out to return the water to its pure state is incredibly difficult, time-consuming, and often impossible.
And framing this level of integrity as the prerequisite for humanity's 3.0 civilization frames honesty not just as a nice moral trait, but as a mandatory evolutionary upgrade for the human race.
Right.
If we don't patch these behavioral bugs, the little white lies, the broken promises, the justified deceits, our collective operating system simply won't be compatible with the future.
We will crash.
Will crash. It forces a total reevaluation of our daily interactions. Every time we say, I will do this, we are playing with the fundamental building blocks of our existence.
We're either constructing the pristine architecture required for Elysium, or we're polluting our own spiritual garden and contributing to the chaos of the planet. Honestly, it makes you want to stop talking entirely. Which, I mean, might actually be a safe strategy under these rules.
Not a bad idea.
So let's take a step back and look at the intense landscape we've just covered today. We've explored a worldview where human words carry literal cosmic weight. A framework where the simple act of breaking a promise instantly and permanently scars an invisible blueprint that dictates your ultimate destiny.
Right.
And we've seen how Kwefeng scales this concept, blaming the lack of human integrity for everything from individual destitution to literal global climate change.
And we also wrestled with the essay's most extreme, uncompromising demand.
Yeah.
That keeping your word even when dealing with scammers, monsters, and bad faith actors is the non-negotiable price of admission to Elysium and humanity's 3.0 era.
Zero exceptions.
Zero. The mandate is crystal clear. You must be willing to lose absolutely everything in the material world to protect the integrity of your inviolable spiritual structure.
It is such a massive paradigm shift from how almost everyone lives their life. It takes the comfortable, nuanced, gray areas of modern society and just turns up the contrast until everything is glaringly uncomfortably black and white.
It really does.
It leaves us staring at a very profound question about the nature of truth and the real cost of consequence.
Definitely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to consider a thought experiment that builds on Xue premise.
Okay.
Imagine if this invisible antimatter structure wasn't invisible at all. What if every single promise you ever made and subsequently broke left a highly visible physical mark right on your skin?
Oh, wow. If the scars of our broken words were entirely public, well, how many promises would you actually be willing to make?
Exact.
Would our entire society freeze up out of pure fear of scarring ourselves, never committing to anything? Or would we, forced by the inescapable visibility of our own words, finally become perfectly, radically honest?
It's a lot to think about.
It really is. Keep questioning. Keep digging into the fascinating materials you uncover, and we'll be right here waiting to unpack the next one with you. Take care.